Hi everyone, I'm delighted you could join us today. My name is Samantha Taylor and I'm the head of research at iFi Global. This is one of a number of webcasts we have hosted this year on the subject of climate risk. It has become a critically important part of our publication, Sustainable Investment Intelligence. And given the number of projects and initiatives that we are currently undertaking in this area, we are likely to be hosting more of these webcasts in the second half of 2026, as well as further expanding our coverage on this topic in SII. Today, we are going to be focusing upon investors and managers' climate risk management capabilities and showing you examples of some of the analysis that we've been doing on this recently. My colleague Simon Osborne and I will be giving a presentation for approximately 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session. If you'd like to ask a question, please do use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We do plan to finish at around quarter to the hour, but I will now hand you over to Simon Osborne, the CEO of iFi Global.
Thank you, Samantha, and welcome to you all, whether you are joining us today, Tuesday, the 30th of June, or one of the many people we understand now watch these things as a recorded podcast. You're all very welcome indeed. As always, we are delighted to have as many people as we do joining us from various different countries from around the world. You are, of course, all very welcome. As Samantha says, my name is Simon Osborne. I am the CEO of iFi Global, which is a research and media house based in the City of London. We have 4 publications, including Sustainable Investment Intelligence, which is out of our stable, is the one that is growing the most strongly at the moment. And it is where we give our increasingly large amount of coverage to climate risk. We've been doing that increasingly, particularly over the course of this year. And climate risk is a subject we also cover in some detail now in our research studies, and of course in hosting discussions like this as well. And one of the reasons we are hosting the webcast this afternoon is to make sure that everyone is aware that SII can now produce tailored reports for clients analyzing the climate risk capabilities of individual or groups of investment managers and also asset owners, particularly pension funds. We can do this by asset manager strategy, by size, by geography, or in any other way you want it. And another reason for hosting this webcast today is to tell everyone about our climate risk capability reports, of which we will be talking a little bit more later. So let's get started. And the agenda today is as follows. We're going to start with some analysis on some views we have, particularly on where pension funds are today with regard to climate risk. And the investment management industry, no matter what part of it, is all very much driven by investors. So if the pension funds and other asset owners take this seriously, so will the investment managers, etc., etc. Then we're going to be giving you some examples of the variety in GP's climate capability standards, and they really do vary. We'll hopefully get into that in a few minutes' time. And then we're going to talk about common blind spots that we see in climate risk management. And then we will touch towards the end on establishing climate risk capability benchmarks, which is one of the things we're very much focused on at SII at the moment. And as Samantha says, we will finish at, or probably before, depending on how many questions we get, the quarter to the hour. So Samantha is the one who's been doing, she's really been at the coalface. She's been the one who's been doing by far the most of the analysis that we put out on both LPs and GPs in this area. And so, Samantha, over to you in terms of what observations you have in terms of what pension funds or where pension funds are in terms of their view of climate risk at the moment.
hmm So we've really seen climate risk become more important on most pension funds' agenda. They generally view climate risk through the lens of its impacts on their reputation and litigation exposure. Obviously, it can't go without saying that pension funds are exceptionally visible investors for litigation attempts by, their beneficiaries and also activist groups like Climate Earth. So within the last 4 to 5 years, you are seeing a kind of a steady stream throughout multiple jurisdictions of litigation attempts to pension funds. The most recent being the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board. They obviously had action brought against them for climate mismanagement, including understating climate risks to the fund by 4 of its beneficiaries. So it really is a front and center issue for them, and you can see it throughout their disclosures, especially for Australian, Canadian, and some European pension funds who have all faced some kind of, it does create a pressure for them. But we are also seeing climate risk impacting asset manager selection. Within the last 12 months, actually, we have seen a number of pension funds drop mandates for very large asset managers due to climate management concerns. First, we have here is I believe it's one of the biggest Dutch pension funds, PFZW. PME has also done this. They've just dropped BlackRock's mandate due to climate risk management concerns. In the UK, People's Pension Fund, I believe, dropped State Street over similar concerns for ESG and climate risk management capabilities. And back in December last year, New York City's comptroller advised its city pension funds to kind of really look at their mandates with BlackRock due to climate risk disclosure issues with the asset manager.
I think one
But
of the
moving,
things, sorry, I was
Mhm.
going to say before you move on, what I find fascinating is I think some of the larger pension funds want to be seen to be the good guys, and they are very happy to penalize managers if they don't think the managers are taking their climate risk responsibilities seriously enough. And as Samantha says, this is relatively new. I think you said that mostly in the last year that we've noticed.
Yeah, last 12 months.
Yeah. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Oh, no, no. Um, but just to that point, you do have certain managers like UniSuper and Strathclyde that focus on having mandates with managers that are a part of these climate initiatives. So, a manager leaving Net Zero Asset Manager Alliance might be a reason for them not to reissue their mandate. Yeah, I'm moving on to insights we picked up through our climate risk tracker. Now you can view this in our publication SII. It's quite a comprehensive grid we have now, but you can really see that pension funds have a top-down approach to climate risk management. Only a handful have both a bottom-up and a top-down, but this is really localized into specific strategies. Canadian Pension Fund, OMERS, has a bottom-up approach for its infrastructure strategy, but it's not rolled out throughout the whole portfolio because they are so large and so diversified. Again, reputation is a front and center risk for them above anything else. And what we have also seen, especially with US pension funds like MassPrim, they really do engage with their managers on the managers' climate risk assessments and management. They are kind of quite reliant on that kind of assessment for it. But I would just add, there is a shift you are seeing. Pension funds aren't just focused on the climate risk through the lens of emissions. They're starting to bring in kind of deforestation risk, biodiversity risk also. So you are seeing a shift in how they understand climate risk as well. But yeah,
Right, shall I move on to the next slide?
yes, please.
Yeah. Climate managers' climate capabilities and their variance by manager and strategy. Do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so we have touched upon this in previous webinars, but we are really picking up on quite a significant variance in climate management capabilities by strategy, but also by manager. Obviously, the underlying asset class does play a large role in how climate management is shaped. So whether climate risk assessments are brought in pre-acquisition, is there a use of it for ongoing management, and how important is it at exit as well? Um,
Can I
there's
interrupt
also
again? Sorry for 1 second, because in case we miss it, I think it's a very important point, and I know there are some climate risk providers following us today. One of the things that we notice, we were discussing this just before starting this webcast, is that some asset managers will use the data from several of the climate risk providers, and others will just use one or two. Isn't that correct, Samantha? So if
yeah,
in one or two cases they'll average it out, they might take five or six, and that the figures, because the figures can be so different. I think you can probably explain this better than me. I just didn't want the moment to pass without making that point. Now you
yeah,
might have one or two examples. I think you mentioned Gresham House is one of.
yes, they take a number of metrics per hazard over various different scenarios. So yeah, they really try it and flatten out the discrepancies between the data. And then you see it a lot in private equity. They don't tend to rely on third-party data providers because there is such a variance, especially within emissions data, that they would prefer to go to their portfolio companies themselves and get disclosure that way. So there is a data issue here. Um, but moving in to the main private market asset classes, you do see, okay, whilst infrastructure, private credit, and private equity all have a slightly different approach to climate risk management, there is generally a baseline. There's a consensus as to how they do it. Unfortunately, this isn't present for real estate yet. It's much, much more varied. But you know, Patrizia is working on creating a kind of a standardized approach across the real estate sector for climate risk management, which you know is quite needed, I think. And then just finally on this page, our research so far has shown that managers with forestry, agriculture, and natural capital strategies have a much more integrated and comprehensive understanding, but also approach to climate risk management because it has more of an effect on asset pricing, you know, conservation projects, that kind of thing. And also they do integrate certain verticals like carbon sequestration, biodiversity credits, and that kind of thing. So it's more material for them on an ongoing basis. And you're kind of seeing it also in energy strategies that we've analyzed, specifically for renewable energy strategies. You know, Gore Street and Resonance Asset Management both use climate assessments for performance optimization, which is very, very interesting and something that is very different from approaches taken in traditional infrastructure.
Right, moving on. This I sorry to give you just a few snippets. We could keep you here with many pages with lots of stuff, but it is in SII's June issue. What we did this month was to take the six largest private market strategies and then take the 10 largest managers in those or GPs in those strategies and analyze their climate risk capability. And what all we're going to do here and now on this in this very short presentation is just give you a few snippets of what's in SII. We have 60 of these in SII, just in these 6 strategies, and then we have the other stuff for our normal climate risk tracker, of which there are 6 or 7 pages, and then we have the LPs with their analysis too. So this is a new thing we've got. So Samantha, do you want to? We just picked a few. Sorry if it's a bit small to see. Do you want to explain why we picked these for the audience?
Yes. So we picked these. I deliberately chose infrastructure and energy because you can see the difference in the sub-asset classes, right? And within infrastructure, there is a difference in what type of climate risk is emphasis put upon. So whether, some like CVC, Capital Partners, and IFM will use transition risk analysis much, much more than physical risk, whereas Stonepeak Infrastructure uses physical risk on an ongoing basis to inform resilience measures, which is something that you can kind of see the sector shift towards. It's not just a screening tool, it's for value protection and also value creation. And as you can see in energy, that is really highlighted. Um, with NCAP, if you see the middle column, you can see that climate risk data is used for asset hardening, especially for battery storage assets to prevent thermal runaway, which obviously is a specific risk for that asset. But it's interesting to see the difference in how climate risk analysis is integrated.
Okay, thank you. And then here's just an example of an exceptionally important category in a lot of different ways, and particularly for climate risk, but in other ways too, the sustainable sector.
Yeah. So here, Campbell Global, I think, scored very, very highly, if not second on our overall table, and New Forest scored first. So it is best in class throughout all private market strategies. Here you can see just how advanced they really are in climate and also nature risk integration. It informs not only just pre-acquisition stuff, it informs the asset design itself. So whether they have certain species that are better protected against extreme wind to shield native woodland and that kind of thing, there's more of a use case for this data, which I think is very, very interesting. And we do have PGIM down there at the bottom, just to contrast it. They didn't do it badly, it's just different to New Forests and how comprehensive their approach is.
Okay. Now moving out of and I want to repeat something I said a few minutes ago. There's pages and pages and pages of this now in SII, and there'll be more pages in the future as we keep on adding to this analysis as we go along. And we can do this, we can slice this and dice this now in different ways for our clients, should they wish us to do so. So coming on to the subject of blind spots, of which there are many, we picked up just a few for today to give examples to the audience of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So first, we've kind of touched upon it at various different points, but the comprehensiveness of physical risk analysis does vary quite significantly. Now, this could be as simple as the number of climate perils analyzed over the scenarios kind of plugged in, but it also links into the number of metrics they use. And also, is it just a screening tool? So they do it, on an annual basis, or is it more integrated into their investment processes and management processes? So that is something to keep an eye on. Then interconnectedness of nature and climate risk. This is slowly emerging, but it's, only a handful of managers so far do mention the interconnectedness of nature and climate. Obviously, they both can feed off one another and heighten one another. Then we have the underutilization of transition risk analysis. Transition risk is very, very difficult to quantify. covers a multitude of different things like carbon pricing, stranded asset risk, litigation, reputation, all that kind of stuff. But there's okay, whilst infrastructure managers will develop tools for transition risk because it's more central for exit, it's some other asset categories don't utilize it that much, and it does have a big impact on valuation. And then finally, the focus should really be on adaptation, not just measurement. Again, climate shouldn't be a screening exercise. It should be fully integrated going forward. But yeah.
Can I come back to nature and climate risk, which we have here as a blind spot? That only applies, I think, to some of the third-party providers and not others. Samantha, correct me if I'm wrong. I think, let's say, for the sake of argument, there are 10 or 12, whatever it is, mainstream or major established firms in the climate risk data business. Am I right in saying about half of them now look at nature, or is it a little bit less than that, or something like that? Because there's a point I
I
want to make before I make my sweeping point.
Yeah, I thought it was just a little bit less. I think there's more that have tools in development, but not yet available.
Okay, can I say something as a complete outsider who probably doesn't know what he's talking about? But I would say that if I was in the climate risk business with the kind of very impressive scientists that all these firms tend to employ, who are very bright individuals, really go after nature for lots of different reasons. It's said at the moment nature risk is roughly where climate risk was 10 years ago. I actually think it's not as far back as that. But I would also bet, if I was a betting man, quite a lot of money, it's going to come up on the rails very quickly. And I would have thought there's going to be a lot of GPs and LPs, in fact, probably as many LPs as GPs, who will want to see the kind of analysis that can be done on nature risk as well as physical climate risk. And those that are just offering physical climate risk might find themselves at a disadvantage if they're not able to do things on the nature side. And we now have not very much, but we have a couple of pages or so in SII on the nature risk analysis. Samantha, do you mind quickly, if your memory is good enough to sort of whip out some of the points that we cover in terms of nature risk tracking?
Yeah, so we do monitor, what aspect is understood about nature-related risk. So whether it's, biodiversity, deforestation, and how they also integrate their understanding. So whether it's seen as a standalone part or whether it is kind of connected towards within their kind of climate uh, risk capabilities. We also monitor what third-party tools they use, and also whether they've had external, expertise to kind of help understand this risk, because a lot of them had kind of help from universities and that kind of thing when looking at climate risk. So we do monitor that.
Yeah. And don't forget the TNFD is now fully in operation, has been for a few years, and that is making a difference, and that will help bring the whole nature side along. Is there anything else we want to say on blind spots before we move on?
It's an ongoing thing, so we will cover blind spots in much more detail going forward because we think it is quite an important issue going forward.
Yeah. And I think as a general point, before moving on, one of the things we notice is, and this is probably a very good thing, is we weren't doing this kind of detailed analysis a year ago, but we were doing little bits of it in a few different ways. And you look at where we are today with back then, definitely there are, really the industry is coming on. We can criticize aspects of it all the time, but the industry is coming along. And I would, at the risk of repetition, say nature again, because there's so many asset owners, particularly pension funds, who want to make sure they want to be seen as the good guys on nature, and they want to be seen doing the right things on that. So this is only going to grow. It's a question of how fast. Right. We also have, as well as an analyzing in this last issue of SII, the top 60 GPs in the 6 categories I mentioned that we did, of which we've just shown a couple of examples just now. We also decided to pick out the top 10 overall, regardless of the strategy. To a certain extent, the strategy you're in does kind of lead to being the ones that are in things like sustainability and energy. You're more likely to be at the top than if you're in some other areas. But those are the top 10 out of the many we analyzed, at least 60 that we analyzed. And this is important for another reason, because we are attempting at the moment, as I said in my brief introduction, to develop what we're calling climate risk capability reports. And we are trying to, we've been talking about rankings and ratings and all these kind of things, and we're still consulting the industry on that. I'm not sure whether we'll go down that route, but what we will definitely do, and we're already beginning to do it, is to hold out the good guys, or hold up the good guys, and say, this is the standard that you should be reaching. If New Forest, Campbell Global, Manulife, whoever it may be, Nuveen Natural Capital can do it, so can you. You really should be doing the same kind of thing in terms of the level of comprehensiveness and the depth of analysis that they are doing. And they are not, by any stretch of the imagination, all doing that. And it's not always, it is to a small extent perhaps a function of size, but it isn't all that. It's some take it more seriously than others. That may be driven by who their clients are, as well as the strategy they happen to be in. But this is something we are really going to promote very heavily from September. These are the standards, and we'll probably be, as the autumn progresses, talking about one standard for the sustainable sectors, another one for energy, another one for real estate, etc., etc. And this is where we hope others will follow and get into the higher categories. So over to you, Samantha, for why you picked, because it was you really who did pick these, why you picked these ones to be the best in class, best in breed, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah, so we selected New Forest as obviously the best in class, simply because it has the most comprehensive approach to climate and also nature risk. They carry out climate risk modeling, they have geospatial analytics, hydrological assessments, and real-time monitoring of forest conditions. And that all informs asset pricing, species selection for their like tree forest composition, bushfire mitigation. Obviously, they have a very large Australian holding, so wildfire risk is a very front and center risk for them, and also ecosystem restoration. So it is really integrated into their whole process. It's not a standalone thing for them. And again, similarly, we've got Campbell Global, which has a similar approach. They integrate climate, biodiversity, forest analytics into day-to-day land management and investment decisions. All of this informs forest design, harvesting strategies, and yield optimization. And then third on the leaderboard, we have Brookfield Asset Management. Obviously, we have analysed their approach across energy, infrastructure, private equity, and real estate, and across the board, they have a very strong climate risk capability ability, essentially. So yeah, very strong. And again, the rest of them, they are, head and shoulders pretty much above the rest. You will also note that a lot of them are in the sustainable aspect of, forestry, agriculture, and natural capital, because climate risk has such an impact on their revenue. You can't shield it. It impacts carbon sequestration, their agricultural yield, forest health, everything. So it's very important for them. That's why they have such strong capabilities.
But they don't all in those categories. That as an average, vis-a-vis other strategies, they're probably in the top at the top level, but they're not all as good as the ones we've just mentioned here. I mean, that's a fair point, I hope. Um, so have you finished on this page? I think we may have
Yeah.
finished. All
Hmm.
right, well, we're nearly at the end, and before we see whether we got some questions, I thought we should just spend a minute or two on what's coming up at SII. We are going to be conducting more research with GPs on climate data selection. We want to find out more about why they will select this company over that company. That's something we are looking at doing. So if that's of interest to you, please talk to us about that. We are also going to be looking to publish a guide to climate data selection, hopefully by strategy. That's another thing that will be coming up in a few months' time, certainly when we get into the autumn as well. And I've already just been mentioning this, the climate risk capability benchmarks, and I put here and ratings question mark. That is because we are unsure as whether we want to do that. We certainly are not going to be pointing a finger at the less impressive and getting ourselves into arguments and all sorts of slanging matches and putting people down at giving them a poor rating. But if we can do it in a way where we can show these are the 10 we've just picked, just shown these are the good guys, and you should all go and try and follow them, then we might well do it. And finally, we are very keen on educating investors and the industry further on the importance of climate risk governance. We did a study well over a year ago now, with a flood risk firm called Fathom on climate risk governance. We did find that a lot of the boards we surveyed were not really up to looking at climate risk. They didn't see it at the time as being a priority in comparison with some of the other risks they have to cover. It'd be very interesting to see whether that's changed at all. We think it should be changing. We're going through, those of you who are in Europe who are following us, you will know it's been a very hot summer. We're only in June still. Goodness knows what's yet to come. And we have this super El Nino later on in the year as well. And that may change things. So we will be maybe talking or educating, stroke, coming up with things to really focus on climate risk governance. So with that, let me stop sharing screen and see whether we have any questions to contend with.
Yep. So the first question is, are you just analyzing private market managers?
Yes, is the answer to that. At the moment, I should add, but we will definitely be broadening that out into the public markets. I can't say exactly when because we've got so much still to do in the private markets, but we would like to get into the public markets when we can. Be very interesting to see what differences there are when we get into public markets.
Mhm. So the next question is, how much improvement is there in climate risk management capability standards across the industry? And do you think that the recent hot weather in Europe will add impetus to this?
Unfortunately, we haven't really been at this long enough to know the answer to that question. I'm afraid. I don't think this is gut rather than anything more gut instinct. I think there has been improvements. I said that a few minutes ago in the presentation. It hasn't been, I don't think, massive. I think it's definitely improving. It's just a question of speed, and will it accelerate? Probably it will, but and it's driven very much by what the investors want.
Mhm. So the final question is, can you cover managers' climate risk capabilities in detail in individual strategies like those covering data centers, renewables, etc.?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Can we do what?
Can you cover managers' climate risk capabilities in detail in individual strategies like those covering data centers, renewables,
Yes,
etc.?
we can slice it and dice it anyway anyone wants, within reason, and we certainly expect and plan to do that. The answer is to that question is yes. I think
Mhm.
that's it. So,
Yeah, that was our final question.
right. Well, thank you all very much. Those of you who are still here following us today, thank you very much for your attention. We hope you find it useful. Do get in touch if you have any further questions with Samantha or myself, and hopefully see you for the next one, whenever that is. So it shouldn't be very far off, probably some point in September. Goodbye, everybody. Hopefully see you the next time.
Bye bye.